to the September 2021 breakfast debate, which we're going to be discussing about the 2021 Resource Governance Index, the findings on Tanzania's mining, oil and gas sector. It has a short video where it explains what the Resource Governance Index is, and yes, we'll be able to see it.
Effective governance of the oil, gas, and mining sectors is a persistent challenge around the world. If well managed, resource wealth has the potential to improve the lives of over 1 billion people living in poverty in resource-rich countries. However, the lack of transparency and absence of accountability in the extractive sector means that citizens often don't see the benefits of their nation's resources. Additionally, poor governance can lead to corruption, environmental damage, and even violence and conflict. Our mission at the Natural Resource Governance Institute is to ensure that countries rich in oil, gas, and minerals achieve sustainable, inclusive development and that people receive lasting benefits from extractives and experience reduced harms. NRGI's Resource Governance Index is a robust, evidence-based tool that allows stakeholders such as governments, civil society actors, private companies and citizens to understand how well countries realize value from their resources, how well they manage revenues, and how the broader political and economic context affects resource governance. To create the index, independent researchers answer almost 200 questions regarding natural resource governance, providing justifications and supporting documentation for their answers. After thorough review by experts, NRGI calculates, analyzes, and disseminates the scores. Recent events and the accelerating climate crisis provide the opportunity for countries to build back better. How oil, gas, and mining resources are governed will play a key role in how societies develop. The Resource Governance Index tells the story of resource governance around the world and provides a roadmap for policy and practice reforms. It's a critical tool for those who aim to promote transparency, demand accountability, and drive reform in the extractive sector. This year, we are launching the newest edition of the Resource Governance Index, focusing on 18 countries. Country-specific data and analysis will be published on a rolling basis throughout the year. To learn more about the Resource Governance Index, visit www.resourcegovernanceindex.org.
Take a note on the performance band. It's good if the score is over 75, satisfactory if it's between 60 and 74. It's weak if it's between 45 and 59. Poor if it's 30 and 44, and of course below 30 is failing. So you can see the overall score falls under the weak band of performance. So how do we calculate this index? We are using 3 components. That is value realization, revenue management, and enabling environment. Now, NRGI specializes in 2 of those components, that is value realization and revenue management. But of course, enabling environment was added because we thought it's very important. What is under each and every component? When it comes to value realization, what we're looking at is licensing, taxation, local impact, and SOEs. When it comes to revenue management, we're looking at the national budgeting, subnational resource revenue sharing, and sovereign wealth fund. In the third component, we have a number of issues that include voice and accountability, government effectiveness, regulatory quality, rule of law, open data, political stability, etc., etc. One of the things that we'll be looking at is implementation gap. That is, we'll be looking at the laws that are available and the actual implementation. And then when we divide the two, we get the implementation gap. So we had a total of 21 laws, and then we had indicators for practice of those particular laws, and when we take the difference, that's what we call implementation gap. When it comes to mining, the score was 58. This 58 was mostly driven by revenue management, which has improved quite significantly over a few years. But as you can see, enabling environment is still not doing very much well. For instance, when you look at the value realization across the 2 years, the last assessment was done in 2017. So when you compare, for instance, when it comes to licensing, the specific score was 59, 50 for licensing back in 2017, but now 66, meaning it has moved a bit higher, etc., etc. So this is how you look at how the changes have taken place across specific components across the 2 years. So you can see that the score is now satisfactory when it comes to value realization. This is for revenue, specific one for revenues at the top. So the budgeting has improved from the score of 40 in 2017 to the score of 60. However, it's the enabling environment that is an issue when it comes to the mining sector. You can see what we have there. Almost everything has gone down over the years. When you see the negative, it means you have just subtracted the 2021 score from the 2017 score. So when you see the negative, it means you have gone a bit down when it comes to that particular specific detail. So when it comes to voice and accountability, it has gone down by 13 points, etc., etc. What is interesting is somehow control for corruption has improved. Another thing that has improved is open data. Of course, for obvious reason, we know that in mining we have got a mining cadastre, and therefore that has improved that particular score. We still have issues with disclosure, especially when it comes to our SOE, STAMICO, even disclosures pertaining to environmental and social impact assessments, and also when it comes to issues with mitigating plans. We still do the law demands, but the implementation is still very, very weak. And when it comes to law and practice, I told you about the implementation gap. You can see it was 26 in 2017, now it's 29. So the gap has increased when it comes to what the law requires the government to do and what is actually happening. So at times it's not very much that we don't have good laws, but the enforcement part of the laws are the ones that are letting us down. And therefore the gap becomes bigger, and of course that has an implication on our score, overall score. Quickly we'll go to oil and gas. 55, slightly lower than the mining bit, but it is an increase of 2 points from 2017. Brought about this improvement is very much having to do with revenue management, because you can see the 2017 coincides with something very important that took place, and that's amendments. And I will leave it to the floor to decide whether those who are responsible for what is happening when it comes to revenue management, or it was just a coincidence. It's revenue management that has improved even in oil and gas sector. For the components themselves, you can see when it comes to oil and gas, the biggest problem is with licensing. Management, you can see it has been improving. You can see the trend is positive. But again, when you look at enabling environment, we start seeing the same negatives that we saw when it comes to mining also, in terms of voice and accountability, government effectiveness, open data, etc., etc. So we seem to have a problem when it comes to enabling environment. And again, the implementation gap is -18. slight improvement from negative 28 in 2017, but you can see why it has happened, because in 2017 we started from a higher score, which is 77 for laws, but when we reached 2021, it was only 67. So that sort of exaggerates a little bit that improvement that really should not be seen as such. Now we can look at the sector comparison. This side, as you can see, is mining, and the other side is oil and gas, and you can see across the two sectors how the score went. The overall scores, of course, it was 58 and 55. But when you look at licensing, mining seems to be doing better. When it comes to taxation, mining does better. When it comes to state-owned enterprises, you can see that it's TPDC which is doing much better than STAMICO, etc., etc. You can see in some areas one sector doing better than the other, and you start wondering, is it the same government? Is there a scope for learning within the government so that what is done well within the mining sector could be replicated in oil and gas and vice versa? There are a few recommendations that were put forward. First, for the mining sector, the ministry responsible for environment should create provision for legal framework that requires disclosure of environmental and social impact assessments and, of course, mitigating plan. Another thing that was recommended is to change the land law so that there is consistency when it comes to issues pertaining to mining licenses and all that. Issues pertaining to compensation and resettlements are not as clear as they should be. And of course, the Ministry of Minerals is supposed to be disclosing contracts and all that by law, but that has not been forthcoming. And that's where you get that implementation gap, not because we don't have laws, but just because there is no enforcement, and we are still mark timing, while we shouldn't do that. When it comes to laws having to do with suspending and cancelling of contracts, we had so many debates when we had 2017 amendments. I hope we'll have them here today. And of course, I told you about the STAMICO issue, which is not doing as well as the TPDC on the side of oil and gas in terms of disclosing their financial reporting and all that. We just hear STAMICO doing this, buying that, but we don't get information pertaining to contracts and details that are part and parcel of whatever is being done by this particular SOE. When it comes to oil and gas sector, the first recommendation is to put together the oil and gas cadastre. And these are the things that I was talking about in terms of learning from each other, because when it comes to mining sector has got the portal that has got limited, but the information is there. But when it comes to oil and gas, there is no portal. And this is the same government who have thought maybe one sector could have learned from another and do something that is similar. Another recommendation is to enforce disclosure rules. And when it comes to disclosure, it's not just the oil and gas companies, but we are talking about even individuals that have got interests within the sector. So we're asking for BRELA to enforce beneficial ownership rules. So we need to know who is who has got conflict of interest, who is owning what. Without that, the whole issue of enabling environment that we are struggling with will never go away. Without further ado, I want to thank you for lending me your ear, and karibuni.
We've heard an issue of law and practice, that we have tons of good laws, well written, but the enforcement is a problem. And that has been a challenge years after years. We have very well written laws, but enforcing them has been still a problem.
Swali la kwanza, je, ni Watanzania wangapi wanafahamu kuhusiana na sekta kwa maana ya oil, gas pamoja na mining? Lakini pia ni kwa asilimia ngapi watu wanatumia na namna gani watu wananufaika? Pia tunajaribu kuangalia ni asilimia ngapi ya Watanzania ambao wanatumia gas na wanajua kodi ambao wanatakiwa kulipa kulingana na gas, kwa sababu leo tunaona competition ya hizi gesi, mtungi pamoja na facility zake zote unakuta mwingine na 45,000, nyingine 42,000, mwingine mpaka 35,000. Sasa zinakatwa kodi kwa kiwango gani? Huduma ambazo zinatolewa kutokana na revenue ambayo inapatikana kwenye hizi sekta, je, ni relevant na watumiaji? Watumiaji wananufaika vipi kulingana na sehemu ambazo wanaishi ambazo zinapatikana hayo madini na hizo gesi?
Question was more of the taxation split and the beneficiary groups of the revenue that is collected in the sector, and how is it split among different groups in the citizen community? The language barrier among citizens community and the partnerships that we have with external partners and other countries. Like, for instance, the locals would get into an agreement of working with other countries, but then there's still a local barrier. There's a language barrier among the two, and how is that being dealt upon by the government? So those are some of the things that we try to brainstorm around. Thank you.
I mean, looking at the few big players who would probably make a noise about any change, was that the only sample space, or did we actually go down to look at the mchimbaji wa kawaida? In any case, there's no doubt that we felt that the enabling environment had become disenabling. And we also looked at, there was mention of Swala, the Australian company who would come around to get some uranium, and of course Statoil that came and left from Norway.
We're a bit concerned about the local content on the extractive industries, especially on the side of oil and gas. In Tanzania right now, we have more than 21 PSAs, production sharing agreements, and all the 21 PSAs, there is a single company from Tanzania. So in literal meaning, whatever we have in gas industry belongs to the owners, whereby no Tanzanian owns a single thing. But thank God we changed our laws, and then our country has 16% stake in every extractive industries. But with those 16% stake is not a local content, it's a government freehold shares. And then the second thing, we did change the laws, the mining and extractive laws. But when we changed those laws, the mining companies had pre-existing contracts. With the new laws, we've noted our government going back to the old laws, with the exception of Barrick, with this new trigger company. That's where we implement the new laws. All the mining companies have not subscribed to the new laws. So, and the government sometimes goes down to them. Where are we going from here? Thanks.
We have seen communities that live around the mining. We have seen people living in poverty in those areas. And we are saying that the mining sector and oil and gas is benefiting the country. But are the community members benefiting enough? And we also looked at women representation towards the mining, oil and gas sector. Are women really represented enough? Are we equally represented? We have seen men doing that work, but we have not seen enough women doing that. Is it too difficult for us to do that?
Joseph and the group, they were talking about the awareness. And most of the questions had to do with awareness. I think this is what Index really presents. It's all about disclosure. Can we have more disclosure the data that people can actually use. Because if you don't have enough information in public, it's very difficult for people to understand what is going on. They will see big mining company, they will see oil and gas companies, but they're almost like spectators. They cannot identify themselves with whatever is going on unless you start opening up and share information. I told you with mining is a little bit better because there's mining portal, so you can easily see nowadays the licensing data and all that. But even that kind of data is not yet there because you need disaggregated data so that you go to the very tiny details of contracts, licensing, opportunities, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult for citizens to participate. There was a question, I think, that links to data from Lily, talking about holes being left behind after the companies have mined. That's why in the index we are talking about, first of all, open data, but we say we need to start disclosing environmental and social impact assessment data and mitigation plans, because before they go for mining, they have to have this document, these mining companies and oil and gas companies. If citizens will have access to such data, they will have information to use and demand their rights, that, you know what, you signed for this, you need to bring in initiatives to rebuild our community. We need to benefit from this because you signed to these and these details. But as long as normal citizens are not privy to these contracts, it becomes almost impossible. And now you come to a situation where the government will tell you and technocrats will tell you people are benefiting. And then you cannot go down and say who are these people and what actually the benefit that you are talking about, just because you don't have data, but more importantly, disaggregated data. In every year, and that's why there was an improvement, there's budgeting, and in the budget you get all the aggregate data about mining, contribution to GDP. It has been increasing. I think now it's 6.4% contribution to GDP, up from 3.8. But if you could disaggregate that, we would know where this contribution goes to. Now, I showed you in the index, we don't have data for sub-nation resource revenue distribution. You just have, you know, budgets going to halmashauri, local government authorities. But imagine if you could be given data saying out of blah, blah, blah revenues from mining in Geita that went to TRA, this amount went back to the halmashauri of Geita. Now you can start saying, but this is so small. Or maybe it's so large, but we don't see value for money when it comes to benefits that we can have. But in the absence of such kind of information, we are all left behind, and, you know, the mining international companies will come and say we are doing so much. The government will say there is so much benefits, but you cannot put value to it. You cannot say we are benefiting this way, and that's why we need data. Of course, there are issues of language barriers, Joseph and the group said, but we can always translate this as we translate so many other documents. You see, at times, and it's unfortunate, at times people in the government believe they are the most patriotic and things have to be left to them. But in most cases, if you want to have good governance, put out there the details so that different people can have a look and give comments. That way you have better understanding, better contribution in the end. You might have more benefits to whatever is happening. Mohammed and the group is talking about disabling environment. It's very interesting. You will see the political stability is stuck at 56 point in Tanzania. and 56 point is in weak territory. But almost every politician you'll talk to, you will say Tanzania is a country of political stability and peace. Almost everyone. In fact, we have memorized that even a normal citizen will tell you hii ni nchi ya amani na utulivu tangu enzi za Nyerere. That's what we see. But we are stuck in the weak territory. If we are stuck on the weak territory and we think we are a nation of political stability and non-violence, what does the data tell us? Are we stuck in the old definition of what political stability and non-violence is? Because it's a different thing defining political stability during World War I, World War II, during Cold War, during Uganda-Tanzania war. When it comes to business, an investor will always want stable legal and policy framework. If he's putting his money, he doesn't want the next day someone to come in and say, I'm changing this law, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Just like that, you know, sometimes you can violently destroy somebody's business by just being careless with your utterance. Someone very senior in the government saying things, you know, rhetorics to make people happy and feel that they're patriotic, but such utterances can have huge impact on investments of the people. Now, we need to move to that understanding so that we can see whether we have that enabling environment as we claim to have. PASCO with the group are touching a very sensitive issue when it comes to local content. You remember last time when the late Mengi was talking about Tanzanians should get in and was told to go and do sales for what? Is it juice or something? The guy who said that came out arrogantly, but he had some truth to that. It's quite expensive to invest in oil and gas as opposed to mining. What I was thinking we could really do as the country is to make sure that we enforce joint venture kind of business models. It may be difficult to one or two Tanzanians, but if they do joint ventures with whoever comes from outside, we may have a starting point. We can come with contribution in kind or come together as locals and do something so that at least that ownership is not just limited to 16% carried interest. How you do that? We sit and talk. You cannot just go and say, now I put together local content policy or law, from tomorrow locals get 15% or 1%, it becomes difficult. And you are talking about pre-existing contracts. When you sign a contract, it's binding. And the laws that were there were championed by one of the big Washington institutions that I won't mention. And one of the things that was there in this 1998 mining law was that you cannot go against the clauses that are there. And the clauses were completely opposite on the 2017 amendments, that you cannot go and renegotiate the clauses, you cannot go and change them. Now, if that's the contract that you signed, you don't say the government has changed because the president has changed. It's still the government of Tanzania. That's why I've said some of these things you can only attain if you sit with people and deliberate on some of these issues, man to man or woman to woman, and see what you can get from there. Otherwise, if you just put them down and assume that just because it's a law you will implement them, it becomes very difficult. But generally, those are the issues. And one thing that comes up very loudly is one pertaining to availability of data.
I'd like to go back to what the Romans did more than 1,900 years ago. They had a church for every day, 350 churches. What has this got to do with Tanzania? How many people have been to Bagamoyo on the road? There are more petrol stations than anywhere in the world. And I've been to Iran, I've been staying in the States, very many parts of the States. And I begin to wonder, do we require so many petrol stations? And then my clever student friend, Mark, he says, do you realize that the government wants every citizen to have a car? And there'll be very many cars, and this is why we require petrol. I don't know what type of cars people use, but would you, every 200 meters, go and fill up? We're wasting our time. And what I've got to say seems to be negative, but let's look at the positive side that have happened in the last few days. Positive things have happened. Mozambique has got a lot of gas just like Tanzania. Cape Delgado, Cabo Delgado, is now free. Portuguese soldiers, assisted by Rwandese, have helped to clean up the place. Now, here's where the religious factor comes in. And it is in here that I've been, thank the president, I have said I'm going to help the government to start a World Heritage Site in Kilwa. Why? Because there is where St. Francis, and there's where the biggest mosque were, and there's been no fighting for the last 400-500 years, not one bit. And that's something we should be proud about. Because a lot of the wars, whether it's Afghanistan, is based on religion. I will end up by saying this. I am not exaggerating. Things have improved. My neighbor, James Gamira, has been released after 4.5 years imprisonment. We had major plans to bring change in Tanzania, particularly on the whole question of disasters related to cancer. There are good reasons why. I will not go into the details. I think the time has come for us to actually have an opposition. Even opposition people are citizens. They're not going to assassinate everybody. Thank you very much.
When we talk about oil and gas, we actually talk about 3 levels. There is upstream, midstream, and downstream. The only comparable part between mining and oil and gas is the upstream. You see, Professor has talked about mushrooming of so many filling stations as you go to Bagamoyo. That is purely downstream business. Whether you have reserve or not, as long as the world technology need oil and gas, you will need to have that. When it comes now to comparing STAMICO and PDC, you see in Tanzania, you can have very small miners, and you go to some places, you find somebody mining outside the house yard. It is not possible for oil and gas because that is highly specialized, and for that matter, you will have to declare, and the authority have to come in and see what you are doing. But with oil and gas, you can do it in a hiding. You can have a farm, a fenced farm, and you can do that business illegally. So this is why you find that somehow the parameters are not equal to have such a fair comparison. That is, I think, answering the why when we compare STAMICO and the PTC. Another thing is awareness. Awareness is knowing the value chain in these resources and how you can position your economic activities to maximize what you get from whether it is mining activity or oil and gas operations. I think we had one of the meeting, I think it's 2 years ago, and somebody was presenting, and he posed the question, do you know what is the most valuable resource when it comes to minerals? Everybody thought it is diamond, it is gold. it was aggregate. You see, when you dig all this building, it's full of aggregate. And whether you have specialized minerals or not, you will need aggregate to develop, building your shelter, bridges, and whatnot. So we need to be aware the value chain. How do we maximize out of the operations that we are doing? And the concern on the local content. I think we need to know, Pasco talked about this, about that some of the minerals that were developed in end of 80s, beginning of 90s, had well, they were secured with the contracts, okay? And those contracts had an item that is called grandfathering. That means if we change your laws, so there are some secured benefits that will remain with the investors. In between here, we came with the initiation to renegotiate. Out of that, we have local content that was taken to be, 16% free carry. Of course, some people say that is a government part, but the government is also local. It's Tanzanian government. Okay? So when you have 16% free carry, you will have managers appointed by the government who will foresee what is happening. During the past, it was possible for somebody to come and extract minerals without paying tax at all. And when we talk about tax, most people think we talk about pay as you earn. Pay as you earn is paid by the worker who has labored. For a mineral to pay tax, it has to pay corporate tax. So if it is possible for a company to come and extract minerals without paying corporate tax, we have a big problem. Okay, so now maybe 16%, we'll see how it works. But what is important to know as a small country is that even what we are thinking we are doing right now, some people may come and think that we were very wrong. Because as we are doing this, we are not sure of what will happen in future. So there's a degree of risk, uncertainty. So what we are supposed to do, when we talk about our resources, we need to have government, the local government, the investors. You have to model the resources together. And the people in the government, they should declare, like the presenter has said, that I'm working with the government. I don't have any interest other than working with the government. And the investors should declare, because some of the investors might be also, they are not given the due diligence of declaring. But there are some countries that have been come into shambles because people go to invest, but they have political interest. You can think of countries like Congo and many others that are in South African sub-region. So modeling will serve to escalate over ages. So what we need to do when you are signing a contract covering a mining for 100 years, you should have a modelers. Modelers who can say, these are the resources, and these are the current prices, and this is the projection of the future prices.
We can ask ourselves, how much information are given out from the government to the citizen on the effect of those projects, the effect of those projects to our environment, to our government, to our economy, to the energy sector in large. We've discussed that transparency is needed in our government. A lot of things are done in energy sector, in mining and oil sector, but not enough information are given to citizens. So we can ask, what are the things that government is doing to increase transparency to citizens?
We discussed about the challenges. We found that there's poor government policies, lack of charismatic, and poor government support. Then after there, what to do in order to solve these challenges. The first one is award to stimulations. We see that we have two companies, Samico and the TBDC. We see that Samico, they do better because they do have also this award of stimulation. When a CEO, say a word, I remove a word, then everybody should follow. A winner must be rewarded. So a word of stimulation also can make a company to do better than another company. Another is public participation. Also, there is an open room between the government and public in order to get all the views that the public has and also the government has in order to mingle together to come up with the new ideas or the new development, which says affordable and a cleaner image in relations to the mining oil gas sector and how to improve it toward attain the goal.
What is the implication of the government not submitting the contract to the parliament for the review as required by the 2017 renegotiation and negotiation of unconscionable terms act? The second one is on what are the implications of the 50-50 principle of economic benefit sharing as stipulated in those contracts, which established the trigger company, and also what is the governance challenge of that?
In the group that the Twitter from the government institution they were talking about the price of oil and gas. We are talking about oil and gas, but we actually import oil still. We have not started extracting it. And as we import, there are so many fees and taxes and all that, and they have an implication on the final prices. But of course, as importers, we are price takers, meaning there is certain fluctuation of prices that we do not have, control of. If they increase because we import from outside. So sometimes it's so many fees and taxes that are affecting us, but in most cases the fluctuations are from global situations. And there was another issue pertaining to unfair comparison between STAMICO and TPDC. Maybe when we leave, we should go and read a little bit about the index. The index doesn't look at actual extraction. The index just looks at policies and laws and their respective enforcement. And therefore, we are looking at those ones. In some areas, like a lot of question came pertaining to disclosure, mining is doing better as a sector in general because they have got a portal that has got details. Details like licensing, how many individuals and companies have been given licensing, and so on and so forth. While on the other side of oil and gas, you don't have that kind of a portal. That has got nothing to do with whether you are mining or you are extracting in the upstream. This is required by law, and therefore when you have got 21 contracts, you are expected to make them public. And if you don't make them public, that's where we have a lot of issues. If I may summarize all the questions that were posed now, they could be answered by one word: availability of data. Just data. People don't have data. If you are talking about no awareness, it's because people don't have data. The data issue has got nothing to do with our ability to do extraction. It's everything to do with political will to ensure that every contract, every agreement that has been entered into is made available to citizens. Because even the law says we citizens are the owners of those resources. So it's quite disheartening for owners to be prevented from having access to information pertaining to what they own. It shouldn't happen. It was very interesting. We have to understand the value chain. Again, how do you understand that if you don't have data to that level? You need to have the data from the licensing part, exploration, extraction, marketing. That data should be available for people to make informed decision and understand what is happening. Amendments, no information given. This is Kiwelu's group. It's true. Again, we are going back to information, transparency. We need, the more information people have, the better, because you'll have people with different professional backgrounds. They will look at it and see some of the clauses that some of you have talked about that were very bad, that came up in the late 1990s. Maybe they came up because it was a small group of Tanzanians representing the rest of us. But what if they put those clauses in public and lawyers could have an opportunity to see them, economists, engineers, geologists, and what have you? I'm very sure the output would have been better than it was at the time. So you need transparency as much as you can. Ezekiel, Vivian was talking about award and all that. And how can the nation align to SDG 7? SDG 7 is about ensuring access to affordable and reliable, sustainable, modern energy to all. I wish the government people would be here to answer that. Lucy and the group, they are talking about the implication of not submitting contracts. I think the biggest implication will be repeating same mistakes. Right now we are talking about how bad were some of the clauses in the 1998 law, but what we are doing now is exactly what they did then. You have contracts, very few people are involved in negotiation and conclusion of the deal, and then in 10, 15 years, the rest of us will see it and say, how did you allow yourself to sign this? That's the implication. The idea of the 2017 amendments was that when you table in Parliament these contracts, members of Parliament will go and consult with citizens and make informed decision on those contracts so that they can see anything that is unconscionable and allow for it to be changed in time. But because we are not doing it and we are breaking the law, by the way, our own law, because we are breaking the law, we are doomed to repeat mistakes that people did decades ago. And to me, that's quite unfair for us to do that. Yes, we can make mistakes, but mistakes of this nature is not being fair to taxpayers and people. The 50-50 and trigger, we go back to transparency. We hear of the 50-50, we hear of 16 carried interest. Where in the public space do you see actual implementation, actual paying, actual figures pertaining to this data? You just hear that now we have trigger, it's a model sharing. Now we have Kabanga, Nico, is also doing that. But where are the details? You want to see disaggregated data pertaining to the contract that we have, pertaining to implementation. Only then can you now give an informed discussion pertaining to all these things that you are given. As I've told you, a lot of stuff that is there in the law, some of them cannot be implementable. Some of them. Even as we say, my good brother there is talking about 16% carried interest. Try to go and ask how many mining companies have actually given 16% carried interest in their activities. Try to follow that. I'm not going to tell you. Try to go and say how many of them have actually done that. Now, as long as we are not transparent, we may assume of getting a lot of stuff, but that becomes a problem. And we have a 2025 goal to ensure that mining contributes to GDP by 10%. We are still at 6.4. 2025 is not very far. In my opinion, we need to talk about these issues. We need to see these contracts. We need to make sure as many brains as possible are involved in scrutinizing agreements and contracts so that we can have something which resembles perfection. I know we can never be perfect. Whatever we do now, our grandchildren may laugh at us, but at least give it a chance. That we'll say collectively, our minds and our thinking ended up there. But if we make mistakes just because a few group of people think they are more patriotic than the rest, then we are repeating the same mistakes, and I'm afraid that's not fair to the rest of the population.
Okay, thank you very much, Abel. On behalf of Policy Forum, I'd like to thank you all for your time. I'd like to thank NRGI for coming through to take this spot and giving us all of this knowledge. Pengine, we wouldn't have known that there is the National Resource Governance Index for 2021 if NRGI didn't come to us, right? So we thank you for collecting all of this data and piling up it on our heads. Now we have to go and research about STAMICO and TBDC and all of the contracts that are not available and know how we benefit as citizens and how our great-grandchildren will benefit from all of this. Until October, have a nice day.